Alright, greetings ladies and gentlemen, and today I'm going to try something a little bit different. I'm going to attempt to do an episode of Game.Hack Live. I'm going to record it for the stream. You're going to be able to see the raw version on the stream. Of course, I'm going to take it and the raw version will end up on YouTube as well, and I'm going to have an edited version eventually. So if you're watching this, this is the raw version and this is going to get edited out. Anyway, if you notice in front of me, I have two consoles today. One is the venerable Super Nintendo, and one is arguably even the more venerable Sega Genesis. This happens to be a Model 2. It happens to be Zero's Model 2, if you wanted to get specific. Ignore the Sega Dreamcast up here. Anyway, I've gone through the liberty of taking all the screws out of the units so that I can demonstrate something. I'm going to lay to rest once and for all the console wars. It's probably been done, but I gotta do it myself. So we're going to open these two units up. First we're going to do the Genesis. I've already taken all the shielding and a lot of the extraneous parts off that you don't need. And if you look at the Genesis board, you'll notice that it's pretty simple. There's not too much going on in there. There's, of course, your cartridge slot, the CPU up here, and this big one down here. This is called an application-specific integrated circuit. If you notice, a lot of the games like Sonic the Hedgehog or Vector Man sort of control and move the same way, where Vector Man or Sonic is always in the middle of the screen. No matter what, they're in the middle of the screen. That's due to this. This handles a lot of the game engine stuff. So you have a lot of the stuff that would be common to every single game built into the system. That makes the games quite a bit cheaper on the Sega Genesis, and in a ways the engines could be a little bit more powerful. It's where your whole blast processing comes in. And this metal can over here, that's just a bunch of timing crystals. It keeps everything in line. And the extra chips here, these are probably memory. This one's probably for sound, or this one's probably for sound or video processing through here. There is a Z80 somewhere on here. I'm not exactly sure what it is. It's not labeled as such, and I can't find the information on it. It's a lot easier to find on the older units, but not this one. If I had a Model 1, I could just point at it and say, yeah, there's a Z80. Anyway, we're going to go over, and for comparing and contrasting, we're going to now open up the Super Nintendo. And you're going to immediately notice, come on, stay off. We're going to open up the Super Nintendo, and you're going to probably immediately notice that this is a little bit of an unfair comparison, as the Super Nintendo is laid out quite a bit differently. I've already unhooked the port block. You'll notice that these two chips and these two chips look very similar to one another. Also, it uses tantalum capacitors. This was so ahead of its time. You got your Sega Genesis. It's got all these electrolytic capacitors here that can blow. Every one of them is an electrolytic capacitor. You go to your Super Nintendo, you got these metal canned capacitors. These are usually tantalum, or they're another very stable material. All of its video and sound and everything, RF output handled right here, and this is handled by a chip set up here. These two chips here are pixel pipelines. If you look on them, they say SPPU2B and SPPU1. These are pixel processing units. It has two of them. This means that it can pump a lot more data through its system. This is the CPU of the Super Nintendo right there, this little buddy right here. And this is its WRAM, which was I think that RAM was specific memory to hold sprites and things like that. A lot of the actual processing on a Super Nintendo cartridge was done on the cartridge itself. The cartridges itself had the mappers and everything on it. All this had was the memory and the pixel processing units. That's it. Everything else was on the cartridge. And of course, a lot of people talk about the Sega Genesis having really good sound. But then the Super Nintendo just completely trounces it there too. We're going to take this little metal box off up here. Sony had a big thing to do with, had a lot to do with the making of the Super Nintendo. They were actually planning on the PlayStation being like a 32-bit add-on for the Super Nintendo, sort of like the 32X was on the Sega Genesis. It never happened, and that add-on actually ended up becoming the PlayStation, which was just a better unit in itself. Anyway, what Sony did, what Nintendo, is they built the sound system for the Super Nintendo. This box here is all the Sony components. You have, these are, I'm assuming, transfer memory. I'm just taking a guess. But the really important things are, we have the chip up here, which is, that's the actual Sony sound processor. And this, down here, is the Sony DSP, digital signal processor, to handle all the sound. For a video game console, the sound having its own memory system, the video having its own memory system, it was a lot like how modern consoles are already. What you would see in a Sony PlayStation or a PlayStation 2 or even an Xbox or a modern computer sort of uses a similar layout, where you have a processor for video, you have a processor for handling the central stuff, and you have a processor for sound. Super Nintendo was already doing that. The Genesis was doing that, but it was just a little bit less compartmentalized. As you can tell, the chip layout on this is very, very well done, where you can just see the way that the data went through the thing. And this is kind of a little bit more archaic, where everything had to share memory, or it was built into the chip in that case, in some cases. The Sega Genesis, I'm pretty sure, shared memory, as far as I can tell by looking at it, especially on the Model 2. If I had a Model 1, I'd be able to take that apart and have a better idea how they used to do things. Anyway, let's go back to the Genesis for a moment here and focus on the application-specific processor. There were some games that had their own processors in them. You notice that there were some games, like there's Street Fighter 2. It's a very light, very not very heavy game. Unfortunately, I don't have the right type of screwdriver to get into it. It has lockout screws that are actually bigger than the ones that are on the Super Nintendo, so I don't have a screwdriver to get into them. And you'll notice that the Super Nintendo cartridges were larger and heavier, and games for the Super Nintendo tended to be a little bit more expensive. If you get some of the EA Sports games on the Sega Genesis, they are larger. They're you know, quite a bit taller than the original Genesis games. They're not shaped the same way. They don't have these two little ears out the sides. And they actually, I'm pretty sure, they have security screws in them too, that I don't have the right size for. These ones are actually smaller than the ones in the Super Nintendo, just to be annoying. But there's more circuitry in here. There's actually more circuitry on the inside of these cartridges than there are these, because there's stuff that these cartridges needed to do that this little thing just couldn't handle. And this is why on the Super Nintendo you had things like the Super FX games and a lot of other neat stuff. But just going to show, right next to each other, the complete differences in these systems. This is the clear winner any day. The Super Nintendo by far just completely annihilates the Mega Drive or the Genesis in just about every category. So that's it. That's the first test for Game.Hack Live. I'm going to edit this out. It'll probably be 5, maybe 10 minutes. But I'm going to probably be playing some games here in a moment. So just bear with me. I have to set up my microphone in the right place again, and I'll put all these back together later.